Shut up and sit down.
Hi everyone, and welcome to today's career discussion with myself, Fergus Kennedy. I work with the Career Development Centre at INSEAD here in Singapore. Joining me today is Larry Medina, a former colleague of mine, and now the Head of Career Services, Alumni and Corporate Relations at ESSEC, also here in Singapore. On his LinkedIn, Larry describes himself as a seasoned professional for the last 5 years now. Does that mean that you're over-seasoned, Larry? There's a little bit more salt and pepper these days, right?
Definitely old man.
Good stuff. Well, thanks for joining me. So just to give people a little bit of background, you've been working with in education for the last 10 years, Larry, and about 7 years in career services. Is that right?
That's correct. So I always joke this is my third career. And so I was an engineer many years ago and went and got my MBA, and then I did finance for a number of years, mostly with technology companies and some education. And then I've been doing career services for about the last 6 to 7 years with a few different schools, including INSEAD and ESSEC.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably why I put seasoned professional, because I've had quite a number of job switches and career changes in my life.
Sure. So we're recording this today right in the middle of the Covid-19 pandemic. You've experienced a couple of slowdowns in the past, and most recently here in Singapore in 2014 when we had the oil crisis back then, and we're having a similar situation here right now. And of course 2008 and back to 2001. How does this one compare to previous slowdowns that you've seen?
Yeah, so I think each one's different. You know, I first moved to Singapore in 2001, right in the middle of I guess right at the beginning of the dot-com bust, and then been through all the other SARS, Great Financial Crisis, etc. This one's different in that as far as scope is concerned, as far as the number of industries that are severely hit this time around in every single geography in the world. So it definitely feels broader from across industries and geographies. It also feels obviously deeper as well. You know, turning off the economy is something that I've never seen in my lifetime, and I think most people will only see it once in their lifetime. So I think the severity is extreme this time.
Mm-hmm. Previously, you'd mentioned that you would expect like a V-shaped recovery. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's something that we're going to rebound from?
Yeah, so I think that the mood has changed over the last 2 weeks, I think, as we see more reopening in North America, in Europe, even in Asia, with, I think, New Zealand's the latest to basically completely reopen. And you see it in the stock market as well, where it looks fairly optimistic at this point. I think specifically in Singapore, companies are still conservative and a wait and see mode right now. But I'm thinking it's feeling a bit more optimistic than it was a few weeks ago. And I think that bodes well for a V-shaped recovery. But I'd like to throw that back at you and just maybe get your sense as to what you're seeing on your side.
Well, for me, I see that there are still companies out there that are looking to recruit. Of course, when a situation like this happens, there's always somebody who's going to benefit from that, and these are the companies that I have targeted to work with in this time, to suggest for our students to reach out to these people or these companies in particular. There are, of course, going to be challenges with some of the bigger industries that we've already mentioned. The energy industry has taken a huge hit. Of course, the airline and the hospitality industry as well has been massively impacted, and that's going to have a knock-on effect for many years to come. But with, as you mentioned, a V-shaped recovery, I do see that especially the airline industry is going to hopefully have a bounce back. But to what extent, I guess it's still to be seen. What are students at ESSEC doing that you see is a little bit maybe unique? What are they doing to overcome these these challenges that they're seeing in the market right now?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, I wouldn't say this is unique, but we work very closely with students, and I'm sure you do, on networking. And especially in this market where now there's probably an oversupply of labor, people looking for jobs, it's very difficult to get any response on a job board, for example. And so it has to be very targeted networking. You know, really reach out to alumni, reach out to personal networks, and really work on those relationships, and really target the types of roles that you think that you can do well. In that, you know, working on unique selling proposition for yourself, understanding why a company would want to hire you. At ESSEC, we have some pretty unique language combinations, for example, with some of our students. And so we're working with them on how do they kind of leverage their unique skills and unique language combinations to really go after specific jobs as well. And then the other one, I know you and I have talked about this previously, is, you know, looking maybe even to volunteer for a company,
Sure.
just to get in the door and really meet people, and look at potentially doing projects for them as well. But more than anything, it's really building that contact with companies and making sure that they know that you're out there. Again, I'd like to throw that back at you, and maybe you tell
Yeah.
me some of the things you're seeing on your side.
Yeah. So one of the best examples that I've seen in recent times, we had a student who went to a presentation by an investment firm. He wasn't from an investments background, but he had a keen interest in that space, and he had developed his own pitch deck and presentations on certain companies that he recommended investments in. And during the presentation, he challenged the presenters with some of his thoughts and findings. That was something that was very much appreciated by the company, and it initiated a conversation that eventually led to a job offer. So things like this that are, maybe, to use a cliche, thinking outside the box a little bit, I find that is very much appreciated, and by organizations. So rather than this churn of applications that they're getting through email and your standard networking, if you come to these companies with something a little bit different, something that's going to grab their attention, then I see that is a really good way to demonstrate your value before you've even started. Have you come across anything like that in the past, or in ESSEC, is financial services an area that your students would typically target?
Yeah, so we have a Master in Finance program, and so definitely we have students that are out there targeting financial services as well. You know, I don't have a specific story like you do, but certainly we work with them as well. And, you know, what you just said basically is, how do you demonstrate the value that you're going to bring to the company? And the earlier you do that in the conversation or in the process, of course, you're going to get noticed. My other comment too that we say quite frequently to students is, you have to be memorable, right?
Sure.
So if they're talking to a lot of people and they're getting sort of generic answers and generic conversations, they're not going to remember. But your case is classic, because they'll never forget the candidates, the person in the audience that actually prepared a presentation and challenged them in the middle of their presentation.
Exactly.
And so you have to be memorable.
Mm-hmm. You've done a lot of work, I know, with executive MBAs. Do you see that there's much of a difference in the way that they need to approach employers at this particular time, as opposed to maybe the more junior MBA classes?
Yeah, so I think, you know, a lot of people do MBAs because they want to make a fairly radical career change, geography, industry, functional area. Typically with executive MBAs, and what I mean by that is about 15 plus years of experience. Sometimes executive MBAs have a little bit less than that, but typically 15 years experience. The types of changes they're trying to make usually are a bit more gradual. And to some extent to accelerate their career. They're okay with their industry and even their functional area, but they're trying to get the acceleration as well.
Mm-hmm.
When they're looking to switch jobs, again, repeating myself, but really the networking, because the closer you get to the C-suite, usually those are based on relationships. And, so who is the person that I know from a conference or who I've worked with previously that would be great to fill the CFO role or the COO role, right?
Right.
And so really work with them on that. And what's kind of surprising sometimes is people that are very successful and senior in their position, because they're so busy with their job and everything they're doing, they don't take time out to focus on networking. One creative idea I saw from an executive MBA was to book in their calendar once a week. I think it was like Tuesday lunch, where she would go out and basically have lunch with somebody that she didn't know. And so that would force her to look for somebody that she didn't know, but that she wanted to meet and talk to, and then book time with them and then basically go meet them. And so I always thought that was kind of a nice way to force yourself, if it's not natural to you, to basically force yourself to go out and network. One more comment on executive MBAs, because when you get to that level, I think executive search becomes an important part of your strategy, because the higher end executive search firms are really looking at that C-suite, C-1, C-2 types of positions. And so I always recommend that they build a relationship with somebody that's in search, and maybe one or two, probably not more than that. So my question to you is, because I know you come from a search background, but do you have any advice for people that are trying to use headhunters as part of their job search strategy?
I think you hit the nail on the head there when you mentioned maybe just one or two, and those that are really focused at the more senior levels. I've seen the biggest challenge that I see within the recruitment space, the recruitment industry in Singapore and anywhere really, is this square peg for a square hole, or and that sort of approach to recruitment. So somebody will submit their application to a position via any of these job portals, whether it's LinkedIn or Monster or Indeed, and the person that typically will see that application many times is a recruitment consultant, whether they are working for an agency or whether they've left an agency and have now moved to an in-house role. And their approach a lot of the time is, as I mentioned, square peg for a square hole. So to make that transition, that career change, it really is very difficult for people to do it via that route. However, as you mentioned, if you're reaching out to these more senior, seasoned exec search guys who have the experience and have the network, and can see the value that you can bring to the table to a company, because they have these long-term relationships with these companies, and they really understand not just the technical skills that are required, but also the type of personality that will really fit within an organization. So they look at a resume and it's not, oh, well, he doesn't have Python, for example, or he hasn't worked in a multinational organization. If they can build that bridge, they can see that in their mind that this person might be a good fit. Having had a conversation, then that I think is the best way to engage with these guys. Yeah, but it is a constant challenge, and people I do see get stuck in that cycle of seeing an opportunity, thinking, oh my God, this fits me perfectly, and they apply on LinkedIn, and then it's essentially going into a black hole, because the person that's looking at their resume is not as experienced and is not able to connect the dots between their experience and what would be required by the hiring manager within these organizations.
Agree.
So I guess next question, what do you see is going to happen, or what do you see are the exciting areas for people to be moving into within the next 5 years?
Yeah, and you alluded to it earlier about some industries are thriving through the COVID situation right now, and that was happening before. So obviously, a lot of data services, whether it's online shopping or artificial intelligence or blockchain, et cetera. So it's really focused a lot right now around the technology, the cutting edge technologies,
Sure.
and in some ways how they're being used for commercial purposes as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see this increased demand, whether it's food delivery, the platform to do that, or online advertising, et cetera, that are growing through the COVID and will continue to grow. So as you and I have chatted before, is students that have maybe not a tech background, but they can speak the language and they know what the technology is about. They can look for those roles within technology types of companies, the bridge between the tech space and the business space, and they could be a really good fit for those types of companies. I think they will continue. Obviously, these companies are going to continue to thrive for a while.
Sure.
The other one I would point out is I still feel like the startup environment, certainly in Singapore and I think some other geographies, is very robust. We see a lot of startups out there looking for talent. And I think what I'm finding now is I think students are more open to joining startups. It's more exciting and maybe viewed as less risky than it was maybe 10 years ago.
Sure.
And so I think that's going to be an interesting space for students to look at in the future as well.
Yeah.
So how about you?
Yeah, I think that exactly, the startup space, and especially in maybe some of the more traditional industries. I've seen that there's lots of companies now, lots of startup companies in energy that you wouldn't have seen 10, 15 years ago. So lots of, I guess embracing of new technologies, and that now is really quite exciting for especially a lot of my students that would be working in oil and gas and are looking at, how can I use my experience and do something a little bit more exciting and more tech oriented. So this is a really good stepping stone. If they want to be in pure tech, then maybe leveraging on their energy experience and working for an energy tech company, is a great way to take that stepping stone into the tech world. As I've said before as well, agriculture is a huge thing right now, and tech within agriculture is really beginning to boom, and that also goes to the likes of fish farming and anything
Yeah.
to do with sustainability, reforestation, and what have you. Yeah, so that I think is that is our time. I would like now to wrap up and to thank you for speaking with me for the last 20 odd minutes. This time we managed to record it. So so thanks again to Larry Medina from ESSEC, and hope all is well and safe on your side.
Thank you, Fergus. Take care.
Thank you.